stories in every deck.
Adventure Cards!
Hey kids, welcome back to Adventure Cards Kids TV. I'm your host, Richard Rosser, inventor of Adventure Cards. And behind the camera is my trusty sidekick, Sparky. Say hi, Sparky. Today, we're going to read a really fun book, Scrambled Eggs Super by Dr. Super. What, Sparky? Oh, he's right. That's not the name of the book. The name of the book is Scrambled Eggs Super by Dr. Seuss. I don't like to brag, and I don't like to boast, said Peter T. Hooper, but speaking of toast, and speaking of kitchens, and ketchup and cake, and kettles and stoves and the stuff people bake, well, I don't like to brag, but I'm telling you, Liz, that speaking of cooks, I'm the best that there is. Why, only last Tuesday, when Mother was out, I really cooked something worth talking about. You see, I was sitting here resting my legs, and I happened to pick up a couple of eggs. And I sort of got thinking, it's sort of a shame that scrambled eggs always taste the same. And that's because ever since goodness knows when, they've always been made from the eggs of a hen. Just a plain common hen. What a dumb thing to use, with all the other fine eggs you could choose. And so I decided that just for a change, I'd scramble a new kind of egg on the range. Some fine fancy eggs that no other cook cooks, like the eggs of the ruffle-necked Salamagooks. Salamagookses, say, they should be good, so I went out and found some, as quick as I could. Look, here's the Salamagooks, with red eggs. And while I was lugging them back to the house, I happened to notice a tizzle-topped grouse in a tree down the street. And I knew from her looks that her egg and the egg of a Salamagooks ought to mix mighty well, ought to taste simply super, when scrambled together by Peter T. Hooper. And look, here's the tizzle-topped grouse with the tizzle top hanging down in front of its face. So I took those eggs home and I frizzled them up. And I added some sugar, 2/3 of a cup, and a small pinch of pepper, and also a pound of horseradish sauce that was sitting around, and also some nuts. Then I tasted the stuff, and it tasted quite fine, but not quite fine enough. You can see the eggshells from those two birds, and he's got all sorts of stuff here, nuts and pepper and everything. To make the best scramble that's ever been made, a cook has to hook the best eggs ever laid. So I drove to the country, quite rather far out, and I studied the birds that were flitting about. I looked with great care at a mop-noodled finch. I looked at a beagle-beaked, bald-headed grinch. And also, I looked at a shade roosting quail, who was roosting right under a lassalack's tail. And I looked at a spritz and a flannel-winged jay, but I just didn't stop. I kept right on my way, because they didn't have any eggs. They weren't laying that day. Oh my gosh, you can see the mop-noodled finch and the beagle-beaked, bald-headed grinch. Oh, I think that's him right there. And look, here's the shade-roosting quail under the lassalack's tail. Wow. Then suddenly, boy, up that hill a short space, birds! They were laying all over the place. Great happy gay families with uncles and cousins, all laying fine, strictly fresh eggs by the dozens. Why, I'd have a scramble more super than super. Scrambled Eggs Super de-duper, de-booper. Special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. I picked out the eggs in a most careful way. I only picked those that I knew were grade A. I only took eggs from the very best fowls. So I didn't take eggs from the twiddler owls, because I knew that the eggs of those fellows who twiddle taste sort of like dust from inside a bass fiddle. This is the twiddler owl. You can see he's twiddling his thumbs right there. I went for the kind that were mellow and sweet, and the world's sweetest eggs are the eggs of the queet, which is due to those very sweet trout which they eat. And those trout, well, they're sweet because they only eat wogs. And wogs, after all, are the world's sweetest frogs. And the reason they're sweet is whenever they lunch, it's always the world's sweetest bees that they munch. And the reason no bees can be sweeter than these, they only eat blossoms off bezelnut trees. And these bezelnut blossoms are sweeter than sweet. And that's why I nabbed several eggs from the queet. So you can see, here's the queet, right? And here's the trout. And then here's the wog that the trout eats. And then the wog eats the bee. Oh, and look, here is the bezelnut tree. But I passed up the eggs of a bird called a strudel, who's sort of a stork, but with fur like a poodle. For they say that the eggs of this kind of stork are gooey like glue and they stick to your fork. And the yolks of these eggs, I'm told, taste like fleece, while the whites taste like very old bicycle grease. Ugh, those eggs taste terrible. Ugh. The places I hiked to, the roads that I rambled, to find the best eggs that have ever been scrambled. I hunted new birds along wild tangled trails, through gullies and gulches, down dingles and dales. I wriggled my way and I crawled at a creep through a forest of ferns that was 40 miles deep. And I mussed through the brush till I found a fine quigger, whose eggs are as big as a pinhead, no bigger. Oh, look, it's right there. And he's got this tiny little nest where his eggs are, right? Then I went for the eggs of a long-legger quong. Now this quong, well, she's built just a little bit wrong, for her legs are so terribly, terribly long that she has to lay eggs 20 feet in the air. And they drop with a plop to the ground from up there. So unless you can catch them before the eggs crash, you haven't got eggs. You've got long-legger hash. Oh no. I laid an egg and the egg cracked and there's another one and another one and another one. Eggs. I'd collected 302, but I still needed more and suddenly knew that the job was too big for one fellow to do. So I telegraphed north to some friends near Fazol, which is 10 miles or so just beyond the North Pole. And they all them jumped in their catamaran side, which is sort of a boat made of sea leopard's hide, which they sailed out to sea to go looking for grice, which is sort of a bird which lays eggs on the ice, which they grabbed with a tool which is known as a squitch, because those eggs are too cold to be touched without which. Oh my gosh, look, they're in this boat, and he's got a basket full of the eggs, and here's the squitch that he's grabbing an egg from the grice. And look, there's grice on all of these icebergs. Wow. And while they were sending those eggs, I got word of a bird that does something that's almost unheard of. It's hard to believe, but this bird, called the pelf, lays eggs that are 3 times as big as herself. How that pelf ever learned such a difficult trick, I never found out. But I found that egg quick, and I managed to get it down out of the nest and home to the kitchen along with the rest. But I didn't stop then, because I knew of some ducks by the name of the single-file Zumsian Zucks, who stroll single file through the mountains of Zums, quite oddly enough, with their eggs on their thumbs. See, all the birds have their eggs on their thumbs, and they're in single file line, oh my gosh, going through the mountains of Zums. And some fellows in Zums, whom I happen to know, just happened to capture 1,000 or so. And they wrapped up their eggs and they mailed them by air, marked special delivery, handle with care. I needed more helpers, and so for assistance, I called up a fellow named Ali, long distance. And Ali, as soon as he hung up the phone, picked up a small basket and started alone to climb the steep crags and the jags of Mount Struku to fetch me the egg of a Mount Struku cuckoo. Now, these Mount Struku cuckoos are rather small gals. Oh, there's one flying in the air right there. But these Mount Struku cuckoos have lots of big pals. They dive from the skies with wild cackling shrieks, and they jabbed at his legs and they stabbed at his cheeks with their yammering, clamoring, hammering beaks. But Ali, brave Ali, he fought his way through, and he sent me that egg as I knew he would do. For my Scrambled Eggs Super de-duper, de-booper, special deluxe, a la Peter T. Hooper. In the meanwhile, of course, I was keeping real busy collecting the eggs of the three-eyelashed tizzy. They're quite hard to reach, so I wrote on the top of a hum icka schnim icka schnam icka schnap. Oh, here's the three-eyelashed tizzy, and this is the hum icka schnim icka schnam icka schnap that he's writing on top to get the eggs. Oh my gosh. Then I found a great flock of southwest-facing cranes, and I guess they've got something that's wrong with their brains, for this kind of a crane, when she's guarding her nest, will always stand facing precisely southwest. So to get at those eggs wasn't hard in the least. I came from behind, from precisely northeast. Oh, look, he's in a boat, and he's got oars, and he's sneaking up on these birds, and he's getting all the eggs and putting them in the boat. And I captured the egg of a grickly gractus, who lays him up high in a prickly cactus. Well, look, here's the prickly cactus, and he's climbing up there. Well, be careful to get the egg of the grickly gractus. Then I went for some ziffs. They're exactly like zuffs, but the ziffs live on cliffs, and the zuffs live on bluffs. And seeing how bluffs are exactly like cliffs, it's mighty hard telling the zuffs from the ziffs. But I know that the egg that I got from the bluffs, if it wasn't a ziffs from the cliffs, was a zuffs. Oh, look, he's flying in a helicopter, and he's getting eggs from the ziffs and the zuffs. And can you tell the difference between the bluffs and the cliffs? Oh, I'm all confused. Now, I needed the egg of a moth-watching sneth, who's a bird so big she scares people to death. And this awful big bird, well, the reason they name her the moth-watching sneth is because that's how they tame her. She likes watching moths, sort of quiets her mind, and while she's watching, you sneak up behind, and you yank out her egg. So I got one, of course, with the help of some friends and a very fast horse. These are his friends, and look, they've tied a rope around the egg, and she's looking at the moth, and they're going to yank it out. If you want to get eggs you can't buy at a store, you have to do things never thought of before. Why, to get at the egg of one very small doff, we had to pry all of one mountaintop off. Oh, here's the doff, and the nest of the doff is underneath the top of this mountain, and they had to use this lever and pry the top of that mountain off to get that egg. Then I heard of some birds who lay eggs, if you please, that taste like the air in the holes in Swiss cheese. And they live in big Zanzibar trees. So I ordered a treeful. The job was immense, but I needed those eggs and said, hang the expense. There's elephants, and they're carrying this Zanzibar tree, and there's all these little birds. Those are some birds that live in the Zanzibar trees. I still needed one more, and I saved it for the last, the egg of the frightful, bombastic, aghast. And that bird is so mean, and that bird is so fast, that I had to escape on a Jilla-icka-jast, a fleet-footed beast who can run like a deer, but looks sort of different. You steer him by ear. Oh my gosh, look, his ears go all the way up and over these things and down, and he's using those to steer the Jilla-icka-jast. All through with the searching, all through with the looking. I had all I needed, and now for the cooking. I rushed to the kitchen, the place where I'd stacked them. I rolled up my sleeves. I unpacked them and cracked them and shucked them and chucked them in 99 pans. Then I mixed in some beans. I used 55 cans. Then I mixed in some ginger, 9 prunes and 3 figs, and parsley, quite sparsely. Just 22 sprigs. And then I added 6 cinnamon sticks and a clove. And my scramble was ready to go on the stove. Oh, wow. Look at all of those eggs that he's going to use. And you know how they tasted? They tasted just like, well, they tasted exactly just like Scrambled Eggs Super de-duper de-booper. Special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. Thanks for joining Sparky and me for this reading of Scrambled Eggs Super. Do you know what time it is now? No, Sparky, it's not time for breakfast. It's time for you to make and eat an interesting combination of food you've never had together, like peanut butter, bananas, and honey on a sandwich, or yogurt with fruit and nuts mixed together. After you try an interesting combination of food, then report back to Sparky and me about your experience. Oh, Sparky reminded me, I have a special announcement. Did you know that I wrote a book? It's called Piggy Nation, and it's now available as a read aloud on a really fun channel called Stories That Pop, led by Ryan Rosser. Stories That Pop encourage listening skills and literacy through traditional storytelling and read-alouds. Learn more by clicking the little I up in the corner, or click the link in the description of this video. Oh, don't forget to subscribe to Stories That Pop on YouTube, and you can also follow Ryan on Facebook. That's it for this episode of Adventure Cards Kids TV. I'll see you soon. Oh, and so will Sparky.
A zillion stories in every deck.